Okay, good morning to you guys. Welcome back. Welcome to everyone joining us online as well. This morning we're going to start with loving kindness meditation, and since you guys have been doing this for a little while now, I'm going to not do the guidance for you guys, where you guys can do this on your own, because you should be able to do breathing mindfulness meditation on your own, and you should be able to do the loving kindness meditation on your own with the affirmations. If you would like to use the affirmations that I use, you're welcome to do that, but those are very general and very broad. I suggest that when you're doing this for yourself, that you customize it for yourself, where you use specific phrases like, may Bob be peaceful, or Rebecca be peaceful, whoever it is in your life that you would like to cultivate loving kindness towards, or even people who are in the past. You can use those. Or you can also use groups of individuals too. Like, say you had anger towards police officers. You could say, may all police officers be peaceful, right? This will help you to train your mind to be able to eliminate any anger, hatred, and ill will, or those lesser versions towards that group of people. So I'm going to start with the chanting. Then there's going to be the period of time where it's just quiet, where you can meditate. Then I'm going to come out with the chanting. And that's where we're going to start today's class, where I'm going to share with you the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. And then we have another topic as well. So if you guys would like to meditate, you're more than welcome to take whatever position you like. I'll just start with the chanting and then end with the chanting when we're all done. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Otang Mahakawanhang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakatoro Kawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusrang Oto Bhagavati. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Photang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatava Manusarang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Before we talk about this topic, I would like to check in with you guys. Do you have any questions on meditation at all? Anything you guys would like to ask about breathing mindfulness meditation or loving kindness meditation? Anything that's going on you would like to get help on? You need a mic, Hugo? Yeah, I think you should keep that with you all day today. That way you don't have to get up each time you need a mic.
Out of interest, we use the word I can't think of the word now. When we say, may you be free of discontentment and suffering that caused. Mm-hmm. Is it only time that we use suffering? Is there any particular reason?
Isn't it what?
Is there any particular reason why we use suffering?
Oh, yeah. So, discontentedness, having discontentedness in the mind, one will suffer, right? Having discontentedness. But I don't use the word suffering to describe that second universal truth. But if you have conditioned pleasant feelings, conditioned painful feelings, or conditioned neither painful nor pleasant feelings, the mind will suffer at some point. One might not describe the pleasant feelings or neither painful nor pleasant feelings as suffering, but there will be suffering. Those painful feelings will be experienced at some point. So that's why I use it there, to remind people that what they're doing is they're on a journey to eliminate discontentedness, which will then eliminate any suffering that the mind experiences.
I understood that the word suffering is not used, or you prefer not to use it. Is that right, or did I misunderstand that?
Well, when we describe that second universal truth, I don't use the word suffering. That's correct.
Okay.
I use the word discontentedness. But the mind is suffering in the unenlightened state. There is suffering that is occurring. But when you refer to that second universal truth, it's important to make sure that an individual understands that it's not just the painful feelings that you're working on eliminating. You're eliminating the conditioned pleasant feelings in neither painful nor pleasant feelings.
Understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. You might decide to just keep that with you, Hugo, so you don't have to get up so much. You'll probably be a lot more comfortable throughout your day. Okay, so another thing I would like to check in on. I know, Hugo, you have older children that you've fathered. I don't know. You don't have any children? I don't think, right? No. Have you ever had thoughts of having children before? Or is this something you were planning to do at some point, or not interested? Not something you're considering? The reason why I'm asking is it'll help me to talk about this particular topic if it is something you guys would like to talk about, because this is actually a pretty extensive talk where I go into a lot of detail about guiding children, and I can relate it to children because that's why it's created, but I can also relate it to other people too. So that's why I was curious to be able to talk directly to you about what your interests are. And if you're not interested in having children, or you're just choosing not to, then no need to go into detail so much.
I not now in my life too old for that.
Okay.
But yes, at some point I was interested, and and then I aborted. Mm-hmm. So it's not in my plans, but for me it's interesting because also we have children inside of us, so it's something that we can just work on. So it's fun. Yeah,
we have nieces and nephews, and we have neighbors that are children and stuff like that. So yeah, I've even had people who prefer same gender relationships here that are in their 70s, and they said that they were interested in this topic because of their own childhood, and they were interested to hear like the Buddhist perspective of how to raise children. So yeah, I can share this with you, but I'm just kind of curious that I hone in on the parts that you guys are most interested in. So this kind of helps me to understand. And for anybody who's online that's listening, you may or may not actually have children or not, but this topic of understanding how to guide children along the path, it'll actually help you if you have children, or if you're thinking about having children, or even if you have nieces and nephews and people like this that are in your life, or even if you have friends or family that you might decide that you would like to guide at some point. There's certain things in here that are going to help you with that as well. So I'll share this with you. And then as we go, just like always, you guys are always welcome to ask questions, either here at the temple or anybody who's online. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and unmute your microphone and ask any questions that you like. So sharing this path to enlightenment and guiding children along the path is a wonderful way to be able to help individuals to be able to make their way on the path. Because as a child, your mind's going to be less polluted. You're going to have a more pure mind when you're younger, because you haven't had all the experiences that an adult has had to be able to have the mind be conditioned. So actually learning early in life is actually ideal. During the lifetime of the Buddha, there were individuals who were getting to enlightenment as early as age 7, that they were actually coming to the Buddha, they were living with the Buddha, and they were training their mind, and they were actually able to get to enlightenment at the age of 7. So if you can imagine going from the age of 7 all the way through your entire life, not experiencing any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these feelings are eliminated, and all the other qualities of enlightenment as well that one would experience, that this would be a very transformative thing in one's life to be able to experience enlightenment. So in order to get to the point where you can actually help children to be able to experience and improve mental state, you would need to know the wisdom of how to guide an individual on the path to enlightenment. So let me share those things with you. First, with just kind of like an analogy to understand that children are like a growing plant. And then you, as a person who's interested in guiding this individual, you're kind of like the plant enthusiast, interested in helping to grow this plant. And then the teachings of the Buddha are the guide stake that is guiding the plant. And you're the one who's kind of orchestrating this and kind of helping them along the path. So if you keep this in mind, that you're not the plant, you can feed the plant, you can give the plant what it needs to be able to grow, but the plant itself has to grow. And that's the choice of the plant, essentially. Even though plants don't make choices and decisions, you understand the analogy. And then this guide stake here, this is what is the teachings of the Buddha, guiding this plant towards improved growth. So if you keep that in mind, that'll help you as we talk throughout today's talk. The first thing to understand in terms of guiding an individual, whether it's a child or anyone else on the path, you need to acquire wisdom first. You wouldn't be able to guide others on the path if you didn't have the wisdom of the path. So you're going to need to learn, examine, and investigate the teachings intellectually. You'll need to be able to reflect on those teachings to independently verify them. And then you would need to practice them, integrating them into your life so that you can see the truth and the wisdom about these teachings. So that's a prerequisite for you to really focus on your own development of the teachings. Then, as you're getting started to share teachings, whether it's with a child or an adult friend or coworker or family member or something like this, it's important to understand that this individual is their own being, right? You can't control this individual. Even though we might say this is my child or my son or my daughter, they're not really mine. They don't belong to me, right? So I might introduce Bailan, my son, as this is my son Bailan, but the mind knows he's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. He's his own individual being making his own decisions, and he needs to be able to cultivate and acquire his own wisdom, because I'm not permanent in his life. He's going to be doing things in his day-to-day life where I'm not there, so he's going to need the wisdom of how to make wise decisions related to the natural law of karma. So it's important to always keep that in mind, that each individual person is their own being. They're not yours. They don't belong to you. They're not there to conform to what it is that you want them to do. Our role in their life is to help them and guide them in cultivation of wisdom. It's very helpful if we start early with the training. You can even think about training as starting when they're inside the womb. With our son, my wife was meditating when she was pregnant with our son. And even when he was inside the womb, we were very careful that we didn't have raised voices, that we weren't arguing, because at that time we weren't practicing the teaching super close. So even though he was inside the womb, he can still hear. Sometimes people think with that skin over the stomach that the child can't hear inside the womb, but they can absolutely hear. And the way that I know this is I used to play mandolin when my son was inside the womb, and prior to that and after that. And I used to play mandolin. And when I would play, he would start moving around inside the womb. And then when he came out and he was actually born, he remembered the sound, that when he would have difficulty sleeping, sometimes I would play the mandolin and he would actually fall asleep easier when he heard that mandolin, because it was a familiar sound to him, even though he only heard it when he was inside the womb. So children can hear inside the womb. So the training is really starting there. So if you have a lot of hostility and anger in your relationship while you're pregnant or while you're around someone who's pregnant, this is influencing the child inside because of that hostility and that bitterness. So you can think about training as beginning when they're inside the womb. And then throughout one's entire life, they can be learning. I started to formally teach my son when he was 6 years old. But prior to that, when he was outside the womb, we would do things like redirecting his mind. So if you understand the Four Noble Truths, that when there's a bodily sensation, you would like to cut off and let go of any discontent feelings, you can actually help a child, because a child's not going to understand that. But at 6 months old, at 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, say they're playing on the floor and you're noticing they're about to become discontent, because they usually make these strange faces when they're getting ready to get discontent. They don't just start crying outright. They usually kind of make this face, and then they start crying, right? So when we would see our son get ready to make that face, we would redirect his mind. We would say, oh my goodness, did you see that cloud outside? I think that's a really beautiful cloud. And then he would snap out of whatever he was thinking about, and he would go look at the cloud. Or sometimes we would grab his hand and we'd be like, hey, look, there's a squirrel over there. Let's go look at the squirrel. And we would redirect his mind. So internally, his mind was learning to cut off and let go of discontentedness, even as an infant and a toddler. So that by the time I formally started training him at the age of 6 about impermanence and the discontentedness, the universal truth of non-self, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, all these things that I was teaching him the same exact methods that I'm teaching you guys, but I was doing it in a context that a child would understand. So his mind was already prepped and prepared to be able to learn and practice these teachings, because it started in the womb, in his infancy, toddler, and then by the time he got to 6, his mind was already kind of starting to be trained well before that, when we started the formal training at 6. So you can start early. And one of the things you can do is you can implement impermanence into a child's life, that they're going to experience plenty of impermanence, but you can actually implement certain impermanence into their life to help them. So I'll give you an example. My son used to really be into Legos. He would put Legos together a lot, and he would make all these elaborate things. And then he would go off to school, at whatever age he was going off to school. And then he would come back and he would play with his Legos. So I knew that he was most likely attached to his Legos. So after I taught him about impermanence, discontentedness, non-self, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and things like this, I then started implementing impermanence into his life in ways that he wouldn't otherwise experience it. Where he would leave his Legos on the floor in the living room after he would go off to school, his Legos would be there in the living room. I would go over there and kind of break them up into 3 or 4 pieces, so that then when he would come home, he would see his Legos on the floor broken up. And the first time he saw that and he came in, right away he started crying, and he was discontent, and he was crying and crying. And I got down on the floor and I'm like, what's the problem, Bailan? What's going on here? And he's like, my Legos. He just could barely even talk. And I was like, oh, what's going on here? Why is your mind discontent? And we started talking about it, and I started relating craving, desire, attachment, and the craving for permanence to his Legos so he could see it. And eventually, he calmed his mind down and he understood. And then I waited, maybe 3, 4, 5 days, and then I did it again. I broke up his Legos when he went to school. And then he came home and he looked at the Legos and he started crying a little bit, but it was very short-lived. It was only like 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and he was able to cut it off and let it go. And then he understood. He was like, oh, this is my craving, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, this is your craving. You're craving permanence. And he's like, okay. And then I explained to him, I said, the Legos, they're impermanent, meaning when they were together, that is impermanent, but being apart and separated, that is impermanent too. You can put them back together, right? And he was like, yeah, you're right. So he starts putting them back together, and he puts them back together. So then I waited another 3, 4, 5 days, and then I broke them up again. And then he came home and he looked at the Legos and he looked at me. He looked at the Legos. He looked at me. He said, you broke up my Legos, didn't you? I said, yep, sure did. He said, okay, I'm just going to put them back together. And he just put them back together. Right? No discontentedness whatsoever. So if you're attached to your child, you'll be unwilling to do these things because you won't want them to experience discontentedness. But if you understand you have to walk through the painful feelings in order to get to the peace and joy on the other side, this is part of the process, that they're going to not be getting what they want. In order to eliminate their attachment, they're going to have to experience those painful feelings. Because if you have a craving, desire, attachment, and you're getting those pleasant feelings, when your mind stops getting what it wants, it's going to get the painful feelings. So when I broke up those Legos, he wasn't getting what he wanted in that situation. So he had to experience enough impermanence with that in order to be able to train his mind to let go. So I wasn't attached to him, and I knew that this was part of the process, so I was more than willing to do this for him. And I've done other things like this in other situations that helped his mind to let go. And then now ultimately, if he comes home and his Legos are not where they were supposed to be or where he thought they would be, he's not discontent or frustrated. Whereas if I never did that with him, he wouldn't experience that freedom or that peace of mind. So it's helpful to start early and introduce impermanence into their life. If they typically put their shoes in a certain place and they're used to coming back to see the shoes and put on their shoes there, move them to another location, right? I actually just did something this week. My son bought a 6-pack of root beer at the store, and he drank like 3 or 4 of the root beers, and there was 1 root beer left in the refrigerator, and I took it and I hid it in the back of the refrigerator where he can't find it. So yesterday when he was at home, he went for the root beer and he couldn't find it. And he asked me when I got home, he's like, "Dad, did you drink the root beer?" He said, "My root beer." And I said, "Oh, is it your root beer? Does it belong to you?" He's like, "No, like the root beer. Did you drink the root beer?" And I just smiled. And then it's actually in the back of the refrigerator. I just haven't given it to him yet. But his mind's completely peaceful. He's not angry. He's not upset. He's not yelling at me or anything like this. So you can introduce impermanence like this, whether it's their shoes or a certain food item or a certain candy or something like this. There was even times where we would be in the mall and he would say, "Dad, I would like to get some ice cream." I would say, "Okay, let's go get some ice cream." So we'd be walking towards the ice cream shop, and then we'd be halfway there or 3/4 of the way there. And I would say, "You know what? I've changed my mind. I'm not interested in going to get ice cream. Let's go home." Right? And I would like completely switch, introduce some impermanence. Whereas if his mind was attached and clinging and craving that ice cream, he would be discontent. And initially when I did this the first few times, he was discontent because he was attached to it. But now having done that multiple times, he's not attached to it anymore, that I can switch my mind like that and he's completely comfortable with it. So you'd like to introduce impermanence like this, and it's going to mean that you're going to need to not be attached to the person, because when they get discontent, if you think you're the one causing their discontentedness, or you have a craving for them to be permanently happy, you're not going to be able to do these kinds of things. You'll feel guilty and shameful that you're doing it. But you need to be able to know that this is the way to actually help the individual. You can create a culture of cultivating and acquiring wisdom as part of your kind of family culture, right? Like, cultivation of wisdom is what's going to help lead to their improvement in the condition of their mind. That's what's going to ultimately help them in all parts of their life, is having wisdom. So if you create this culture of cultivation of wisdom in your home, then they'll kind of get used to this. So there were times where we'd be driving in the car, for example, and my son would ask me a question. And I would say, "I don't know the answer to that question." And he's like, "Oh, really? You don't know the answer?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know the answer." I was like, "But I bet you I know who does." And he's like, "Who?" I said, "I bet Google knows." I said, "Why don't you use the phone and actually Google that?" And he's like, "Oh, good idea." So then he would like Google it, and then he would come up with the answer. And he was so, he was enthused that he was able to actually find the answer for himself. And then I did that multiple times. And now he's at the point where if there's ever anything that he's interested in knowing, he knows how to find that information, whether it's asking me, whether it's looking in a book, whether it's Googling it or something like this, searching online. He knows that cultivation of wisdom is really important. So you would like to create this environment of the cultivation of wisdom, because that's what's ultimately going to lead to the improvement to the condition of their mind, and teaching them how to independently determine whether something's true or false. Because there's times where he's looked something up on Google and he said what it was and it didn't quite sound right, or maybe it did sound right. And I said, that's one source on Google that's giving you that information. Why don't you look at 2 or 3 other sources and compare and see if you're getting the same information? Right? So I'm kind of teaching him and guiding him how to cultivate wisdom and not rely on just one source, and not just believe something that you see, but instead use multiple sources. So this is a great way to help a child. Remember that you're a role model in the people around you. They're going to be looking at you for cues about how to function in the world, whether it's children or coworkers or neighbors. The way that you function in the world is the way that other people are going to function around you. So you're teaching teaching people at all times as a role model, that they're going to be looking to you at your moral conduct and your mental discipline to determine how they should function as an individual. Because the way beings learn is they learn from other beings. Snakes learn how to be snakes from other snakes. Alligators learn how to be alligators from other alligators. Humans learn how to be humans from other humans. So if you're functioning in a bitter and harsh and hostile way, the people around you are going to function that way too. But if you're more loving and kind and peaceful and compassionate and friendly and respectful, the people around you are going to function that way too. So always keep in mind that you're teaching through your actions, not just your speech, but through your actions as well. Being respectful to your life partner, to your parents, to your siblings, your grandparents, any elders or people in the community is really important, because again, you're a role model and they're going to be looking at you. So if you disrespect your parents in front of your children are learning how to have a relationship with their parent, which is you. So if you're disrespectful to their grandparents, they're going to be disrespectful to you. So you would like to always be holding your parents in high regard and speak in kind and friendly and warm and loving ways about your parents. Even if you disagreed with certain things that they did, you can still talk in fond ways about your parents, right? My son knows that I experienced a certain amount of abuse growing up as a child, but he also knows that I loved my family. I just disagree with the way they treated me in certain situations, but I never do that in a disrespectful way. So you're teaching your children and the people around you how to interact with you through the way that you interact with other people. So by you being polite, kind, friendly, respectful to all the people around you, your children and the people around you will learn how to do that as well. Like we were talking about yesterday, get comfortable with the struggle and allowing it to occur. Oftentimes when children are struggling, parents have a really hard time with that. My son at one point had struggles with friends in the village. And my wife and I talked with him about how we thought it would be unwise for him to spend time with these particular children in the village. But ultimately, at the end of our conversation, he was interested in spending time with these individuals. And we said, okay, if you would like to do that, that's up to you. You do whatever you would like to do. And he continued to spend time with these particular children in the village. Well, it wasn't too long after that he came home one day and they had stolen his bicycle helmet. And he came and told me, and I was like, oh, okay, well, what would you like to do about this? And he's like, I don't know what I should do. He was like 7 or 8 years old or something like this. And I said, okay, well, Dad can help you if you'd like me to help you. He said, okay, I'd like you to help me. And I started helping him to get this this bicycle helmet back. And then afterwards, I had a talk with him again. And I said, see, this is why Mom and Dad suggested to you that you don't spend time with these friends, because we knew things like this was going to occur. And he said, okay, I understand. And he still decided to hang out with these friends, even after they had stolen his bicycle helmet. And then it was only a matter of a few weeks later that he came home and they had dumped a bucket of water on his head. He was riding the bicycle and they stopped him, and then somebody came up behind him and dumped a bucket of water on his head. And it wasn't Sangran. It wasn't during the New Year. And then he came home, he was all wet. And we asked him, we were like, what's going on? What happened? He was like, oh, they dumped a bucket of water on me. And I was like, oh, okay. You see how they're treating you. Is this something that you would still like to be doing? And ultimately, he decided not to spend time with those friends anymore. But he needed to go through that struggle. He needed to cultivate wisdom to see what his choices and friends were leading to. And then what I noticed is as he started moving around from school to school to school, he had the wisdom of how to make wise friends. That whenever I met his friends, I could tell that they were into wholesome things by spending time with him and his friends. Whereas if we didn't allow that struggle to happen in the village, he would have never cultivated the wisdom of how to make wise friends. So if we would have stepped in and tried to force him not to hang out with those friends who we knew were going to be bad news for him, he would have never cultivated that wisdom. So by allowing the struggle to happen, he was able to cultivate the wisdom, and now he's able to make friends no matter where he goes. He always has these really wholesome friends that he spends time with. So you're going to need to allow the struggle to occur, whether it's bad grades or challenges with teachers. Sometimes he would come home and talk to me about teachers, and I would say, what are you planning to do about that? How would you like to handle that? What is your plan? These kinds of things, instead of me just stepping in and handling everything. So you're going to need to allow that struggle to occur. And again, if you're not attached to your child, you'll be willing to allow that struggle to occur. It's important to help children eliminate attachment to their parents, because they will be attached, and your parents are typically attached to their children as well. There's things that you can do to eliminate clinging to your child through allowing them to spend time with other people. If you get used to them going to grandma and grandpa's house and spending time there, or aunts and uncles, or having sleepovers at friends or family members' houses and things like this, this will help them to understand that you are not permanent in their life, and that they can get comfortable staying with other people. They don't have to always stay with you. So there's various things that you can do. If they call you on the phone, like once they get to the point where they're using phone calls and stuff, don't answer the phone every single time. Even if you're sitting there doing nothing and you could easily pick up the phone, let it go to voicemail. Call them back in a few hours or maybe a day or so later. This can help them to train their mind to be able to see that you are impermanent in their life and allow them to eliminate their attachment. It's important to have patience whenever you're teaching a child. Just like you need gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, a child's going to need the same thing. So you're going to need to have patience, and you're going to need to be comfortable with repeating teachings over and over and over again. I cannot even tell you how many times I've talked to my son about lying. It's well over 100. Him and I have talked many times, and he just continued to lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. And I didn't get angry. I didn't get frustrated. I just talked with him and guided him and made sure he understood each time how unwise it was for him to lie. So you're going to need to repeat lessons over and over and over again, and that takes patience. It's important to be creative and have fun. You can create enjoyable activities and games because children usually are challenged with intellectual conversation. It doesn't really develop until they get into their teens. So when we started formally training, or I started formally training my son at the age of 6, it was like a 3-minute sit down and chat about what impermanence is. And then it was like, hey, let's go out in the village and play a game. He's like, really? What game? I was like, let's go try to find something that's permanent. Let's go look around the village on a scavenger hunt. He was like, all right, Daddy, let's go. So we went outside and we looked around the village and tried to find something that was permanent. And of course, he couldn't find anything. So then we switched up the game and we said, let's try to find things that are impermanent, right? So we walked around the village and he saw a crack in the sidewalk and he's like, that's impermanence. I was like, yeah, you're right. And then he saw the green leaves in the tree and the brown leaves on the ground. And he's like, that's impermanence, right? And he just kept pointing these things out. And we had a nice little game. And we did this with many different things related to the teachings of the Buddha. I kind of invented these fun activities and games for him to learn. So with children, you would like to teach them through fun activities and games. It's important not to force your child. Be welcoming and inviting to them, allowing them to learn on their own, not forcing them to meditate. If you tried to force someone to meditate, like if someone tried to force you to do something, like what's the first thing you do? You dig in your heels, right? You're like, no, I'm not going to do that. So that's the same thing your child's going to do. If you try to force them to meditate, you can be sure they're not going to meditate. So they need to come to these teachings at their own interest. So you can invite them and welcome them, allowing them to make their own decisions, including on meditation. It's helpful to start small and then build from there, starting with very basic guidance and asking them from there to build. When I first decided to start training my son, he was 6 years old. I was sitting on the sofa, he was sitting on the floor, and he was watching like some cartoon or something, we were watching something on the TV. And I didn't even know if this child would really follow and listen and actually learn the things that I had to teach him, because I hadn't really taught him much up to that point. He's only 6 years old, right? We were just having fun as dad and son. So I looked at him and I said, Bailan, can you hand me the remote control? I was just interested to see if he would take my guidance or not. He said, sure, Daddy, here you go. And he hands me my remote control. I was like, okay, looks like he'll listen to me. So then he got up a few minutes later and he went in the kitchen to get a drink of water. And I said, can you bring Daddy a glass of water? And he said, sure. And he got a glass of water and he brought it to me. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. So I could see he was taking my guidance and he was willing to do things that I asked him to do. So I built on this, and I slowly built from that point forward to the point where now we can have, in-depth conversations about the teachings and helping to guide him. So you need to start small and then slowly build from there. Get comfortable with mistakes. You're going to make mistakes along the way as you're training and teaching your child. And you can laugh at those mistakes. Don't take them so serious. You're not going to be perfect. Your children aren't perfect and you aren't perfect. So you're going to need to get comfortable with them making mistakes. They're not going to be able to learn the teachings and immediately implement them. And you're going to need to get comfortable with you making mistakes in terms of the way that you're teaching them through trial and error. There were certain fun games or activities that I thought would be wonderful to teach him and help him to learn the teachings. And I would implement it and start playing with him with those things. And then I'd realize 5 minutes into it, I was like, this isn't working. And I would just completely switch or abandon it or go do something else. So you can get comfortable with that. There's proactive training versus real-time training. Proactive training is like sitting down and talking about the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Three Universal Truths, things like this, going out into the village and playing scavenger hunt where we're looking for impermanent things. That's proactive training, where you're training him ahead of time. But then there's real-time training where when they're in actual struggles, like when he was on the floor with the Legos having difficulties, I was able to step in and talk about craving and the Four Noble Truths at that point. So there's proactive things where you're going out and he's learning ahead of time, but then there's real-time training when they're actually involved in a certain struggle. So you're going to need to be able to implement the training at those two different times and doing it with loving kindness, compassion, and patience. Be prepared for detours, because when you've eliminated your cravings, desires, attachments, you'll be willing to take a detour. There were times where we would be headed off somewhere and something would be happening and we needed to take a detour. What I mean by that is one time we were going to play miniature golf and we were headed towards miniature golf, something that he enjoyed to do. And as we were headed on our way to miniature golf, his ego came up. He was like, Dad, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to absolutely crush you. I'm going to score this and I'm going to score that and I'm going to do this and, I'm going to, do this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, oh yeah, really? That sounds like a lot of ego to me. And he's like, no, it's not ego. It's the truth. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And you're not even going to be able to get anywhere near my score and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm not really interested in playing miniature golf with someone who has so much ego. I'm going to turn back around and go home. And we turned back around and we just went home. I wasn't angry. I wasn't frustrated. I was just showing him that, hey, when you have ego, people aren't going to be interested in playing with you. So now when he plays with his friends, his ego won't come out. Ultimately, by the time he gets to enlightenment, he'll completely eliminate and dissolve his ego. But in this situation, I needed him to be able to see that his ego was going to hinder him from being able to go do what it is that he was interested in doing. So say you have two children and they're putting on their shoes and they're putting on their jackets on their way to school or on their way to some fun activity, and they start arguing and festering and being upset with each other. Mom and dad or aunts and uncles need to be willing to take a time out and just sit down and say, hold on a second. We can't be going to where we're going right now. Let's sit down and talk about what's going on, right? If you have a craving to hurry up and go play miniature golf, you're not going to be willing to take your time to have that conversation. Or if you're on a craving to go to that water park and play in the swimming pool, you're not going to be willing to take your time to sit down and talk to these two children about the argument that they're having because they're festering over who has this and who has that. So you're going to need to be willing willing to just pause and take a detour and have little impromptu discussions for 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there when something's not going well. The ultimate goal isn't to hurry up and get to where you're going. The ultimate goal is to do it joyfully, to do it cheerfully, to do it without hostility, without ill will, to do it harmoniously. So if you're in the process of heading somewhere, even if it means you're going to be late, it's better to take a pause and actually talk about and discuss what it is that's going on. Because who cares whether you show up on time or not if everybody's frustrated and agitated and annoyed? You would like to show up with harmony in the family. And if there's not harmony, then no reason to go to this fun activity. And more the children realize like, hey, we're not going to get to be able to do the fun things that we're interested in doing if we're not doing it harmoniously, right? So this is what you would like to be willing to do. And if you don't have craving to do the certain activities, then you'll be willing to pause and take every moment as a teachable moment. Always be supportive and encouraging. Speak to your children in uplifting and encouraging ways because they're going to have curiosity and they're going to be interested in growing. But if you're degrading and disparaging to them, it's going to be demotivating and hinder them from being able to learn. So being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful at all times. Children are younger than us, but they're not below us. Right? We're not above them and they're not below us. We are all equal. They're just a being that doesn't have as much wisdom and they need more help in learning and growing in the world than an adult potentially, right? So don't think of them as being below you and be supportive and encouraging when you spend time with them. It's important to eliminate any anger or aggressiveness. If you're making decisions with your child in growth and development and there's anger and aggression behind it, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So it's important that you don't shout, that you don't hit, that you don't spank. Any of that kind of stuff is just going to produce difficulties in your relationship. There's going to be fear, and they're only going to be doing things out of fear because you're shouting, hitting, and spanking, and they realize that if they don't do what you want them to do, they're going to get that. Where what you would like them to be able to do is come to the cultivation of wisdom, and that's what's going to lead to the development of their mind. While I was hit many times growing up as a child, I've never hit my son even once. I've never even raised my hand as if I was going to hit him. I've never even had the thought of hitting this child because I know that it doesn't produce anything beneficial. So if you can do things without anger, that's what you would like to do. So if you're angry or having aggression in your mind, if you're frustrated, that's not the time to be talking to your child. It's not the proper time. Step away. Wait until your mind calms down. It might be a day or two or an hour or two or a week or two before you can talk about a certain topic. And that's okay. That's where the patience comes in. Understand the difference between firm speech and harsh speech. You're never interested in using harsh speech with a child, but there are some rare situations where you might use firm speech. It's the same words and word choices, but it's just firmed up a little bit. So the first probably 4, 5, 6, 8 times we talked about lying with my son, it was, Bailan, you shouldn't be lying. This is really unwise. People aren't going to be able to trust you. You're not going to be reliable and dependable. You're going to have a lot of difficulties in your life if you lie, right? We're kind of talking like this. But then after like the 6th, 8th, 10th time, it was like, Bailan, you really need to stop lying. This is going to cause you significant issues in your life. You really need to stop that. Right? So it's like firming it up a little bit, but it's not harsh. It's not aggressive. It's not coming from a place of anger. It's just firming it up a little bit so they see how serious you are and how important it is. So if there's any anger or aggression behind it, this is harsh speech. But if it's just firmed up a little bit with your tone and your tempo, the word choices are practically exactly the same. It's just the tone and tempo is a little bit firmed up. And you can do this with a child, and it will help you. The Buddha did this as well. He talks about this, that his students oftentimes were like children to him. I wouldn't do this with a student. I wouldn't firm up my speech. But with my son, I've done it many times. And even with my wife, I did it occasionally. Very rarely, but even with my wife, I did it every once in a while. So you can implement something like that that will help that individual to be able to learn and grow. It's important to impart wisdom by sharing guidance on improved decision making over multiple discussions. We're never talking about Bailan as a person. I'm never saying like you are a bad person, right? It's always about his decisions. It's always about, I'm not so sure that this decision is the best decision. Can you think of another decision that might be a little bit better? Right? So we're always talking about improved decision making, but not about him as a person. It's just about his decision making and how to improve that. So asking questions and confirming that they understand is really important. So as you're teaching them about wise decision making, I will teach him. And then after he says he's got it, then I will ask him questions to be able to confirm whether or not he actually understands what he's been taught. There's going to be many, many lessons and repeated tasks that you're going to need to be able to share with the child, where you guys can learn sitting down for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in long discussions where we take breaks and lunch breaks and stuff like this. A child doesn't learn that way. Many of the lessons that I taught Bailan were 30 seconds here, a minute there. We might have even been riding in the car, right? We were riding down the car. There was a dead animal on the side of the street. He's like, "Hey, Dad, look, there's a dead dog on the side of the street." I was like, "Yeah, what's that? What is that?" He's like, "Oh, that's impermanence." I'm like, "Yep, sure is." Right? And we would keep on going, right? So these little 30-second lessons here and there, or like maybe we're driving down the street and somebody's laying on the horn and honking the horn. And I would ask him, like, what is that about? Why would somebody be so angry to lay on the horn like that? And he's like, "Oh, that's from craving. That's where the mind's not getting what it wants. And now the anger is arising." I'm like, "Yep, exactly." Right? So you can have these little short mini lessons. Use the Eightfold Path as a guide for your child. This is going to provide you exactly the plan that you would like your child to know. Sometimes people go out and get all these parenting books and all these different resources, and they all are conflicting with each other. They're all in conflict, that there's not one particular book that's explaining it exactly the way the other book's explaining it and all this other stuff. And oftentimes people are just kind of guessing at what they think is going to be best. Whereas if you look at the teachings of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, it's the complete perfect plan of exactly how you can get to enlightenment. And this is the same exact teaching that you can teach your child. All of the 8 factors, you can guide your child through these 8 factors. So when I would be involved with my wife and my son, and I would hear my son talking to his mom in a certain way, I would say, "Hey, Bailan, hold on a second. Before you finish your sentence, I noticed that it seems like you're not quite using right speech here." Right? I was like, "Do you remember right speech?" He's like, "Yeah, I remember it." I was like, "Okay, well, what are the factors of right speech?" And he would go through those factors. And I would say, "Okay, well, which ones are you practicing and which ones are you not practicing in this conversation with your mom?" Right? Guiding him through the Eightfold Path, that he could see that he wasn't being gentle and he wasn't speaking with a mind of loving kindness with his mom. And that's how he was able to improve his relationship with his mom, because at one time they had a very contentious relationship. They had quite a few challenges in their relationship, but now they have a very loving and kind and warm and gentle relationship. But it was through the Eightfold Path that, just like you need to be able to learn that, and that's what's going to guide you to enlightenment, it's the same thing that's going to guide them to enlightenment. So you'll be able to teach them the Eightfold Path if you know the Eightfold Path. Teaching life skills is very helpful, like cooking, cleaning, laundry, ironing, shopping, gardening, exercise, conversating, reading, all these different things. These are all life skills that a child's going to need to know, including the Eightfold Path. Including the 5 precepts. These are all things that a child's going to need to know. So you can guide them in learning those things, because it's not just the teachings of the Buddha that they're going to need to learn. They're going to need other skills as well. It's important not to punish your child, that people are oftentimes punishing a child. Whereas if you punish, all they experience is painful feelings from that. They're not actually getting the guidance that they need in order to make improved decisions. The challenge is that they're making some unwise decision. The way to fix that is not punishment. The way to fix that is help them to cultivate wisdom. So in order to help them cultivate wisdom, you're going to need to speak to them, talk to them, have discussions with them, and explain consequences of decisions in a very calm way, when you guys are all calm, right? Because that's the natural law of karma. If you're helping them see the cause and effect between their decisions and what they experience, that's what's going to help them. Now, there may be some situations where you do need to take certain things like TV or video games or their favorite toys or things like this, but you would like to do that with them making the decision to do it. So, for example, when we first started talking about lying with my son, the first 2, 3, 4, 5 times, it was all discussion, me helping him to understand the wisdom of how it's so unwise to lie. But then eventually it was like, okay, you've been lying now for quite a while. We've talked about this many times. He's like, yeah, we sure have. And I was like, okay, well, now that we've talked about it, is there anything that you don't understand about lying? He's like, no, I fully understand that I shouldn't be lying. Okay, so if in the future you lie, I think we need to do something to get your attention more. That apparently you haven't been able to understand this and practice it close enough. We need to get your attention so that you can understand how important this is. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, I think maybe you need to step away from the TV or the video games or whatever it was that he was involved in at that time. And he was like, we were talking about it. And ultimately he came up with what he would like to do. He said, okay, if I lie again, I'm not going to watch TV for 3 days. And I said, okay, that sounds good. That sounds reasonable. If you lie again, then you'll give up TV for 3 days. I agree. That's a wise decision. So then it wasn't more than about a week later, and he lied again, and he gave up TV for 3 days. And then we talked about it, and we discussed it. And then he said another one. He said, okay, I'm going to give up TV for 5 days if I lie again. And he kept expanding it. And it was him coming up with this. So then when he actually lied, he already knew what was going to happen. It was his decision. It wasn't me punishing him. It was him creating an environment for himself that he could be able to learn and grow and develop and stop lying. And it took multiple times for him to be able to do this, but it was him coming up with these things rather than me doing it to him. So when I was implementing them, it actually went a lot better because he was more willing to do that. Because it wasn't me punishing him, it was him choosing it for himself. So when it got to the point where he needed to give up the TV, he was more than willing to do that. You can reward good conduct, where when you see them actually doing things that are wise, rather than looking at punishing them for the things that they're doing, instead talk about the things that they're actually doing wisely. I call this accentuating the positive, right? So when I was teaching my son how to speak more wisely and more gentle with his mom, there were times where I had to step in and say, hey, I think you're not being so gentle here. But oftentimes what I was doing is when he was talking well with his mom, I would say, you just talked really nice with your mom. That was such a great conversation. Hey, I really like the way that you just did that. That was really wise, right? So I would accentuate the positive and helping him see when he was actually doing things wisely. So as you see your children or people around you, even employees or friends or family, you can actually accentuate the positive. And this is going to incentivize them to continue to do those things multiple times. It's important to understand that you don't know the full story whenever your children are talking to you. You should never assume that you do know the full story. There are times when my son would come home from school and he would tell me things that happened at school. And I was like, okay. And if I only listened to him and that's it, boy, I wouldn't know the full story and I might go into the school and make a bunch of unwise decisions. So I would listen to him, understand his story. Then I would talk to the teacher and understand the teacher's story. And sometimes they would allow me to talk to the other child and I would understand the other child's story, right? Or I would understand the other child's story through the teacher, right? And now I have the full understanding. Whereas if you only listen to your child, you're going to assume you know the full story. And now you might go into the school or wherever it is and make unwise decisions in what it is that you're trying to resolve. So don't ever assume that you know the full story. This is helpful. The Buddha calls this not clinging to your perceptions. When you're talking to your child and you're guiding them, location and position is very important. That when me and my son have something really serious to talk about, he will typically sit on the floor and I will sit in a chair. Again, he's not below me, but what I noticed is that it helps him to absorb the information. Whereas if we're just talking casually side by side on the sofa together, there's a different level of attention that he's paying to my words than when he's sitting on the floor and I'm talking to him because he'll absorb that much better. So at the beginning, I needed to ask him to come over and sit on the floor because we had something important to talk about, where now he just knows whenever we're talking, I say, hey, Bailan, I have something really important I need to talk to you about. Can you come over and sit down? And he'll come and sit down on the floor. And now he tends to be more attentive when he's sitting on the floor. So this is helpful to have a child sit on the floor when the adult is trying to teach them, because they'll tend to absorb it and pay more attention to it when you do it that way. It's important to understand that you can be friendly to a child, but you are not their friend, right? A friend interacts with a child in a much different way than a parent or an adult. So while we can be friendly to our children, we are not their friend, and it's important to keep that in mind. Ensuring that children understand true love and what that means is really helpful, because it's going to be beneficial for them in their relationships. There was a time where my son came to me and he told me that he didn't think his mom loved him. We were driving down the street and he said, Dad, I don't think Mom loves me. And I said, really? Why is that? And he started explaining these different things. He said, I don't know. I just don't think she loves me. And he was like explaining different things. And I was like, really? Well, what is true love? What does it mean to love somebody? And he didn't really know. So I said, would you like to know? And he said, yeah. So I explained to him what is true love. And then he started to understand it. And then I started giving him examples. And I said, would somebody that loves you do this? He's like, yeah. And I said, if somebody loves you, would they do that? And he's like, yeah. And I said, if somebody loves you, would they do this? He's like, yeah. And I was like, your mom does all those things. I was like, do you think she loves you? And he's like, yeah, I think she might actually, right? So instead of telling him, like, of course your mom loves you. Are you silly? Of course she loves you. Instead, I had to help him to cultivate wisdom about what true love is, and then help him see it so that he could come to the conclusion himself and know with 100% certainty that his mom does love him. So it's important to make sure that a child understands what is true love. And then communicate love, not just in your speech, but through your actions as well, because actions communicate love. So ensure that you're communicating love not only through your spoken words, but through your speech as well. If you have multiple children, it's important that you share love with all of them equally. If you treat some of your children one way and some of your children a different way, this isn't going to go well in the household. So it's important to treat everybody equally. It's important to spend quality time with your children versus quantity of time. Sometimes people think, spending a lot of time with your child is important, but it's actually the quality of the time. Because sometimes people are working, they're spending a lot of time to acquire basic necessities to sustain their life. They don't have a lot of time to spend with their child, but they can spend quality time when they are actually with their child. If you're in a situation where you have shared custody of a child, where maybe they go off to mom or dad's house, maybe you guys are separated or divorced, and when they're with you, you're teaching them these teachings and you're guiding them in that way. If they go off to mom or dad's house, when they come back, if that individual isn't teaching them the same teachings as you, when they come back, their mind's going to be in a different place. Right? So you shouldn't have the expectation that because you were teaching them in a certain way, now they go off to mom or dad's house for 2 weeks and they've been gone away from you. When they come back, they will have regressed. They will have taken steps backwards because this other parent isn't necessarily guiding them in the same way as you. So be prepared for that they're not going to necessarily be in the same place. Your children can be influenced by others. So when they go to school or they spend time with their friends, you might notice your children, when they're with you, maybe they don't have very much ego. But when they go off to school, maybe their friends have a fair amount of ego. So when they're coming home from school, they have a bunch of ego in their mind. So you're going to need to be able to spot that and help them see that. It's important to teach your children how to enjoy things versus being excited. Sometimes when parents come home and they see their children, they create a lot of excitement. It's like, mommy and daddy's home. Yay, let's run out to the car and see mommy and daddy. Let's get so excited. If you do it that way, then when you're gone on a business trip for 2 weeks, they're going to miss you. They're going to feel lonely. They're going to feel bored. They're going to have painful feelings. So if you allow the environment to be created in such that there's all this excitement, then that's those conditioned pleasant feelings. When you're there, they get so excited that means when you're gone, they're going to be sad or frustrated or having other feelings like this. So it's important to teach them how to enjoy certain experiences that they're having without this excitement. So when my wife comes home from the USA, she goes for 2 months and she comes home. We might go to pick her up at the airport, or we might see her when she comes home, but we don't have all this excitement. We hug, we kiss. Hey, nice to have you home, Mom. Like, how was it? What was going on? But there's not all this excitement in the way that we're interacting. We're just enjoying that time. Praise and reward. You can reward positivity and wholesome conduct. And sometimes your rewards can be things like words, hugs, and things like this. There were times where my son, does things wisely, and I might give him a little rub on the head or a little hug, or, hey, giving him some encouraging words. But sometimes it might be a chocolate bar. It might be a bag of chips, things that I would have bought him anyway, but I'm just using it as a way to help him to see that he did something wise. So say we're in 7-Eleven. He's like, Dad, can I get a chocolate bar? And I'll say, hold on a second, let me think. The other day, you talked really nice with your mom. You were being really friendly. You helped her wash dishes. You've been cleaning up your room. Sure, you could get that chocolate bar, right? I would have got the chocolate bar for him anyway, but I'm just connecting it to his decisions that he's making in the home and the way he's interacting, so he can see that, yeah, he's making wise decisions. So of course you can have that chocolate bar. So you can use that to be able to help them to be able to see their wise decisions and that they're being rewarded through these certain little things that you're able to give them. Okay, do you guys have any questions on any of that? Any questions? Let me see if we have any questions online here. Okay, I don't see any questions here. Okay, so most of the time when I'm teaching this, there tends to be a lot of questions because there's a lot of students who might have questions. You guys don't have very many questions. So normally this takes us the entire morning to be able to go through this. We take a mid-morning break. We're actually at our mid-morning break now. If you guys like, we can take a mid-morning break, and then we can do the same thing like we did on Tuesday. I can discuss the topic that we were going to discuss this afternoon, and then we can actually be finished by lunchtime if you guys would like to do it that way. Does that sound good for you guys? Okay, so why don't you guys take a little break? It's 10:30. Why don't we come back at 10:45, and then I'll go into this next topic, which I'll show you guys what this is. It's developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends and a life partner. This is a way to determine who to involve in your life without being judgmental. Because if you're judgmental towards people, this is unwise. It's going to be harmful to your own mind, but you would like to be practicing wise decision-making or discernment about who to involve in your life. So I'll teach you guys that in about 15 minutes. So those of you guys online, if you would like to learn with that, we'll be coming back in about 15 minutes. So we'll see you guys after break. Okay.